And I will pass it to Fanny.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for making it today. I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Fanny Perez. I'm a second-year psychology major. I work with the Latinx Resource Center as part of the DPF Mentor Fellowship program from the Dream Center. And I will go ahead and pass it on to Alex.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the grad school panel. I am Alex Arellano. I use pronouns she, her, hers. My position, I work at the Latinx Resource Center as the advanced field study intern. I'm a fifth year student majoring in psychological science and in criminology, law, and society. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us, and I will pass it back to Fanny.
Thank you, Alex, so much. Right now, I do want to go ahead and take some time to introduce our panelists. So I will pass it on to them, whoever would like to start first.
Hello, good evening, everybody. It is 6 o'clock over here, so that's why I'm saying good evening instead of good afternoon. I am a UCI alumni, graduated about a year ago, and I'm now in the PhD program in clinical psychology over here at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. I'm also an undocumented student, so hearing that you are working also from the UCI Dream Center, that's also a home that was for me while I was there. So nice to know that other people are still going and to get advantage of UCI's resources to get us to where we are now. And I'm also a single mother to a 3-year-old son about to turn 4 in February. So if you all hear his like little TV music, that's him.
I can go. Hi, everyone. My name is Veronica. I use she, her, ella pronouns. I'm also a UCI alumni. I graduated in 2016, and then I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison for my master's in counseling psychology. And I'm now a 4th-year doctoral candidate in the combined counseling, clinical, and school psychology here at UC Santa Barbara. And I'm excited to be here and to be able to share some of my experiences and knowledge.
I can go next. My name is Oscar Fernando Rojas Perez, he, him, his pronouns. I am a postdoctoral associate at Yale University School of Medicine and a UCI alum from 2011 and come from Dr. Castellanos' mentorship team, who, if you all know her, had the opportunity to work with her, has placed many of us in many parts of the US, and we're thriving because of her spirit, energy, and just resourcefulness and resilience to continue to push the mission of increasing the underrepresented student across graduate programs. So in gratitude with Dr. C.
Gracias, Oscar. So am I next?
Yes, feel free.
Thank you, Fanny. I guess that's the click, right? When you could talk, when you're no longer muted. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for being here. It is so exciting for me to be able to be part of this panel today. Of course, it is not only an honor, but I'm so excited and proud to see my mentees thrive and be here in this community, to be able to give back and come and share. I'm also super excited to be part of this initiative with the Latinx Center, to be able to spend some time with Fanny and her colleagues and peers, and my very good colleague Adeli, who has this vision and is moving forward and creating an amazing cluster and community for Latinx students at UCI. And so for me to be part of this today is not only, I think a moment in time that I can later on look back and say that's a beautiful collaboration, but it's also a time to be able to look and say, this is a time that we contributed to our gente, to our community, so that our students can share their narrative. And so thank you all for being here. And thank you to my mentees who were willing to come today, coming from different parts of the country, as you hear, but still here present to share their story. Felicidades y gracias por estar aquí hoy.
Thank you everyone so much for tuning in and sharing a little bit about yourselves. We do want to go ahead and get started with the panel. So I have a first question regarding to your preparation. for getting ready for graduate school. First question here is, how did you prepare for graduate school? Can you tell us the activities students should engage in with and the role of mentoring for you?
Do we have an order, or is it just, how do you want to do this?
However you guys feel comfortable going.
Okay, I don't mind going first, and just please cut me off because I also want to be mindful of sharing space. So I can go first if that's okay.
That's totally fine.
All right. So one of the biggest advice that I got, at least in my experience at UC Irvine, and I think what really helped my portfolio was the diversification of my portfolio. So it was a matter of engaging in research, maintaining a good GPA, engaging in service, essentially the pillars that Dr. C essentially talks about, right? It's kind of like this formula to get you into graduate school. So it's what made a difference for me was having experience in different areas, specifically with research, in addition to receiving mentorship and being able to be a mentee, because I think that's really key. I think we come with strengths, and we also we have a lot of our areas of growth. So that's where that culture of humility and learning humility come into play. So being able to be a mentee. So for me, that meant being able to connect with folks who had prior experience, who had known the system, who had prior experience in graduate school, who had been working with students, getting them to graduate school, and listening to the advice. These are folks who actually know the system, know how to navigate it, and kind of already have a formula in place. For example, I was really resistant to leaving California. I wanted to stay in California, and Dr. C sat me down and was like, "You need to leave." Not in those exact words. She said in a very loving and kind way, but essentially that was the message. You need to be marketable, to make sure you're competitive, to make sure that my values aligned with what I want to do in terms of my career, was to expand my horizon and essentially leave California. And I thought I'd be back in California after grad school, and these opportunities of leaving have opened up many doors for me. So being a student, essentially being a student of someone who can mentor you and listen and essentially implement the advice, right? These are folks who know, so we can listen and they can guide and share. At the end of the day, it is our decision that we make, and we have to live with the outcomes. So being open, being essentially vulnerable, and having faith and knowing that folks who are mentoring you have your best interest at hand. That's just kind of my own experience. And I speak of my experience with Dr. C because she's been mentoring me since 2010. We're kind of on our 12th year anniversary. So.
Oscar, she sat me down too, and that's why I went to Madison, pero no me gustó. But very similar, echoing what Oscar shared. I think being involved in research, I was part of the coach program in the counseling center with Dr. Ortega, and that was huge and foundational for me in understanding what is a career path that I'm interested in, why am I interested in it, what can it look like for me. I was also involved in the multicultural center with REACH. I was also part of a multicultural sorority, Phi Lambda Rho, where I was able to build community and connect with like-minded individuals, particularly mujeres who were also interested and passionate about pursuing graduate degree. And I think the biggest thing was being comfortable and asking those questions. I think echoing what Oscar shared and being vulnerable of I remember having a conversation with Dr. C of saying, I don't know what graduate school is. I graduated high school and I thought the next thing was community college, and next thing you know, I'm at UCI and I thought the end thing was just your bachelor's. And so being able to ask those questions around what is the difference between a master's and a PhD, and how do I know when I'm ready? I actually decided to stay a fifth year for that same reason, so that I could expand on my academic portfolio and get a better sense of what is it that I'm interested in pursuing, and just having that mentorship, those individuals that are open to having those conversations, particularly when you have intersectionalities of, being first gen or being a woman of color, being of minoritized identities, and you're in a space where you might not know exactly how it works or what are the ins and outs. And so being able to have those conversations and admit to not knowing everything, I think that was foundation on preparing for graduate school.
Something like a word that is really coming out to me is intentionality. I feel like towards the end of my 4th year, that's when I was applying to graduate school, and I didn't get in the first time I applied. And I had done what I was recommended to do, like reach out to the student. Like I reached out to Veronica and she was giving me advice, so like Oscar was saying, like reaching out to people that are already in grad school, like they let you know what was the process like what to expect, what is it that you don't hear about. So it's also about making sure that you're around people that will be real with you, just like we're going to be real with you all today, because we want to be able to genuinely support each other. So I could have done more is what I'm trying to say when it comes to intentionality. Like I did what was recommended of me, but going into the 2nd year, I wanted to be more intentional with myself. Like, okay, this is what you want to do, but why? What is your why? So really understanding what your why is when you're applying to graduate school is really important, because if you can believe it yourself, then the people reading it will see that in your work as well. And then also reaching out to professors that you're interested in wanting to reach out to. I knew that the first time I was applying, but a part of me was like a little scared to actually reach out to them, so I didn't. So because I didn't get in, like you never know, like what if it was because they weren't accepting students with that specific interest. Like there was this professor that had experience with intimate partner violence, but when I reached out to him, he told me that he was just looking for students that were interested in researching anger. So it was a match, but not a match for them for that year. So we sometimes are not able to really know, oh, well, why didn't I get in? So it's important, reach out to the professors too as well. Before you apply, you save time, you save money if you have to pay, but most of the time you're able to get fee waivers. So that's what I'm trying to say, like intentionality, not only with where you're applying to, but knowing your why yourself as well.
Is it okay if I add to that? Thank you for sharing that. What you were saying really sparked, made me think about purpose, and along with intentionality, in sitting down and thinking about one's personal values. And I refer to Dr. C a lot because she teaches me about life and spirituality and just academia. And so, I've taken so many lessons from her, and it's purpose. What is your purpose? What is your intentionality, and how are those congruent with maybe the program that you're interested in attending, taking a risk and knowing that there isn't one linear path. We all have different social, cultural experiences, some limitations that may prevent us from thinking outside of the box. So for example, I come from a single parent household, specifically led by my mother. So I wanted to stay in California because I thought that was going to be the best for my family. And I had Dr. Whiteman, he continued to watch over us. He sat me down and really challenged me in a way that I first didn't understand, and I took offense to it, and I made sense of it afterwards, which has led me to where I am today because of his teachings. So as I reflect, I think about what has my purpose been each step of the way, and sometimes I don't know that purpose, and this is where a lot of the guidance and mentorship that I've received has really been helpful, because I really relied on my ancestors to lead me. For example, Dr. White always told me there's a plan. I always wanted to know the exact details of everything, and he would never tell me. He would always say the plan is working, but I was like, Dr. White, I don't think it's working. And today he's still telling me the same thing, it's working. I'd probably be like, I don't know what you're talking about. But when I step outside, the overall purpose was for me to obtain my degree, which we did. And I didn't do it alone. I had tremendous support. So to me, it comes up to add to what Maria was saying. It's intentionality and purpose, and thinking that there's no one formula and there's no one right way, or to do this. What's the most effective for you, giving your context and giving your own cultural upbringing, right? How does it align with your own values?
Hi again. I have another question for all of you. So regarding the transition to graduate school, can you tell us more about your own experience? Like, how was the matching process into your own graduate program, and how is the graduate school different from your undergraduate education?
For me, the first thing that I was looking into was the research interests. That's how I was basically making my list. Dr. C recommends this graduate school matrix, which was very helpful. It really allows for you to be able to see, okay, this is their name, this is their email, this is their research interests, and also like their bio. It allows you to see like more about their values and if they're open to meeting with you once you send that email before applying to graduate school and you're able to meet together, then you start feeling like, okay, this is how our mentoring would be. Or sometimes we confuse what a mentor is versus an advisor. And that is something that I will share with you all, that at first I didn't feel as much I was getting like that mentorship. Like I come from Dr. C type of mentorship where she's there for us as a person as well, not just about our academia, further motivating us and really not only checking in on us, but even our families, and knowing the value of family and all of the values that we have within ourselves. So that's the type of mentorship I'm used to. So coming in and not having the same experience, which I didn't really notice when meeting with my now advisor, and then during the interview process, like I don't know if it's because people are trying to make a good impression for you to come to their program, but it also comes with like remembering our voice and really like voicing that like these are some needs that I would like to have met to ensure a good experience. And if they're open to it, they're going to attend to it. Thankfully, I had that conversation with my advisor and things are way better now. But if we stay quiet and don't also stand up for ourselves and what we know we deserve, it might, I don't know, I feel like my graduate school experience wouldn't be as good as it is now. And wait, the question was about ensuring match, right? So yeah, that's what I would be saying, like being open about talking about what it is you expect besides just the research match and the practice match or whatever the program is going to be entailing about, if that's important to you.
Yeah, I think building off it, I think match is such an open-ended word, right? Like, and it really depends what you're looking for. I think that when I pursued my master, I was really looking for that mentorship and that guidance, similar to the one I had received with Dr. C. So I went to Madison where Dr. Gloria had, I was able to do a summer research program with her, and I felt like I was going to be able to continue to receive that mentorship and preparation. I think when it came to my PhD program, match looked different for me, where if I'm being completely honest, I didn't feel that connection with my advisor, and I very much have an advisor and I've learned to make acceptance of that. But the match is that I am a few hours away from home and I can drive and see my parents, and that is a value that's important to me and it's salient. The match is that I'm around my community and that enhances and maintains my well-being and mental health. And so I think match looks different, and something that has been really helpful is Oscar has been talking about purpose and values, and I think that's really important, right? To being able to assess what are your values at this moment, and values fluctuate and change with time. And I think that during the time of me thinking about my PhD program, my values were very much centered around this is a lot. This is a marathon, right? So what's gonna cultivate and help me maintain my mental health? What are the things that I need close enough to me, and what are the things that I'm not willing to sacrifice? And so my decision was based on that. And then I thought about research and my advisorship. And it's not to say that that's not important, but in that moment in my life, my values were leading in a different way. In terms of what is different from graduate school, what is different from undergrad to graduate, I think the caliber, the way that you are required to show up. I think that in undergraduate school, there's a sense of being on autopilot, and you can show up to lectures and you can be attentive, or you can, catch up later. And I think with graduate work, there's this requirement of showing up and being able to engage in conversations in the seminars, and being able to engage in critical consciousness and think openly. I will say imposter syndrome seems a lot louder in graduate school, and that's something that I have grappled with and continue to grapple with, of just like, do I belong here? And, that feeling. And I think I'm learning to recognize that that's part of the deal, right? Because it wasn't created for us originally, and there have been changes, but the foundation still continues to operate through white supremacist culture and values. And I'm in that space constantly. So I think that's different, in just like being more aware of the structures and systems that I'm a part of, and also the recognition of I need to be part of these current systems so that I can advocate and create change. And so there's also been a flexibility of just stepping into my power and my voice with graduate school that felt a little different from my undergraduate experience.
Sounds like y'all talked about my experience without me even sharing. So thank you for doing a lot of that work for me. I'll add a little bit to it. So a couple of things that come to mind in terms of the transition to graduate school, the difference, and also the matching process. I think the word that comes to mind is flexibility. I think our values are constantly changing depending on the context that we're in, right? My values first going into grad school, for the most part, have stayed the same. However, they shifted in terms of priority level. Right? My values for to like get out of grad school as soon as possible, which now I reflect on, like, I wish I would have taken my time. So thinking about your values and being okay with them shifting depending on the context. Being flexible. I think it was something that I didn't do as much. And as I reflect on my experience, if I could change it, I would be a little bit more flexible. And what also comes to mind, there's something that's coming to mind that left me. But with those two cents, that it's a great question that's being asked, and it's one that has many different answers. So for me, my transition to graduate school, I left California to the Midwest. So that transition was really difficult because I was leaving a piece of my identity, a piece of who I was, and kind of molding myself into this idea of a professional. And I remember the word that I was thinking about when thinking about the transition and thinking about the future is positionality. What are you doing today that's going to position you differently in the next year, the next 2 years, the next 3 years, the next 4 years until you're done on your career? So the way that I looked at when I was applying to programs was, how can I position myself in a way that's not only going to benefit me, but and also the community that I was bringing with me, whether that be my immediate family, my larger community system. So in that sense, thinking about positionality, I took the best offer. So how can this offer position me for the next step of my life, which was attending the University of Missouri? And that positioned me in a way where I wouldn't have to take out any loans. I was able to kind of continue helping out my mom because the cost of living there was very minimal, great tuition reimbursement, great funding opportunities. So at that point in time, like I mentioned, values change. And for me at that time, my value that was a priority was getting my PhD. And that meant being okay with kind of shifting, putting my family second. Because in order for me to be able to help them, I also have to be able to help myself. We can't pour from an empty glass as much as we want, as much as we try. We can't. So for me, the transition was difficult because I was leaving a big part of who I was as a provider, as someone who protected my family, and learning to do that from a distance was very challenging. So the transition was hard because I was leaving these values, right, of who I was here in California and adapting to more of this independent way of life and thinking in order to survive in the Midwest. Because I was balancing academia, I was balancing, work, I was balancing family. And if I was giving so much of myself to all these places, but not giving me anything, then I wasn't gonna be able to perform. So that's where like that shift in values kind of happened. I did have a couple of offers, and again, thinking about positionality, Dr. C and I sat down together, and she's like, well, what's going to position you best for what's next for you postgraduate school? So therefore, taking the offer from Missouri made the most sense. And of course, I trusted her, and she was guiding me through this process, and she provided the space for me to reflect and kind of empowered me to make my own decision, which I really appreciated. And that's what a mentor does, right? They provide you options, and they never force you to pick something that you don't want to do, even though it may be what they think is the best. At the same time, she allowed me to practice my own agency. And the difference just wasn't, the work's not hard in graduate school. I think oftentimes we think that, oh my God, graduate's gonna be so hard. I was actually having a conversation with the student this past week that it's not the work that's hard. What's hard about graduate school is the personal growth. It's the person that you're becoming in the process. It's what you're learning about yourself. It's where you're coming to understand that you have a voice, that you have resilience that you didn't even know existed, that you're a survivor, and that there's some areas of growth. Essentially, you're looking at yourself for the first time in the mirror. So the work is not that hard, the actual like application, because we're all here, we all have experience with academia and learning and taking exams. It's not that you can't do the work, it's more, can you do the internal work, right? Like, do you have the ganas to kind of keep going when it gets tough, when you have, a couple of readings to do per day and balance your assistantship while providing clinical services. And at the same time, making sure you call mommy and, learning about the family chisme for that night. And then also making sure you have time for yourself outside of that. So it's more of a balancing act. So it's not the work, it's more of looking at yourself in the mirror and learning to balance, learning areas of growth, resilience, survival, and so on. So it's more about the internal process than the actual work.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Veronica, Oscar, Maria. It's so inspirational to hear your stories and to kind of hear everything about your preparation and transition. We will now be moving on to your post-degree work. I just want to go ahead and say that hearing all of your different perspectives really helps not only me, but I can guarantee that it helps most of us who come from similar backgrounds and kind of have that same struggle of thinking that when we go to grad school, we will have to change our values and kind of put our family second, even if it's difficult for us. But at the end of the day, we're not only doing it for ourselves, but for the people who are there with us along the way as well. So the next question is, what are your plans for the PhD and master's programs? What is the value of the postdoc or master's? Will you teach, do clinical work, or both?
Can you ask that question one more time?
Yes. So the question is, what are your plans for the PhD master's? What is the value of the postdoc or master's? And will you teach, do clinical work, or both?
I can go first because I want to say I'm probably the only one who's at that stage of their careers.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a PhD in counseling psychology, and my plan was this is how, my mom always says, we plan and God laughs, right? At this time, I expected to be back in California in a tenured track position, doing research. And I'm yet to be back in California, and I've come to accept it that when the universe wants it to happen, it will happen. And I'm happy where I'm at. So after I got my PhD, I took a position in Boston, and it was a postdoc in global mental health and I wanted to just get more training doing culturally responsive research. So learning methodology that I wasn't taught in graduate school. That didn't kind of go as planned. So then I left and took a position now in New Haven where I'm at as a postdoctoral associate. And I'm continuing to do more research, more community-based participatory research with the community. And my position is very unique because I'm housed in the Department of Psychiatry, which is the School of Medicine. So I get to do a little bit of everything that I trained to do and everything that I wanted to do. So my main appointment is research. So I'm paid to do research 100%. However, I also do provide clinical services to monolingual Spanish-speaking folks at the Clínica Hispana. So I dedicate about 5 hours a week. Of course, I want to practice, so I want to do that. I'm also licensed, so I'm able to kind of basically I run my own little shop with my own little clients. I also students, which is really a great opportunity to kind of keep me up to date with the literature. In addition to that, I also teach. I do trainings, I do consultations. So I get to do pretty much everything that I went to graduate school for. I don't think I could solely do practice. I don't think I can solely do teaching. I want to be able to do a little bit of everything because it, again, diversifies my portfolio, it diversifies my skill set. I really do like the research realm, so that's where the majority of my efforts go into. And the postdoc, what the postdoc has allowed me to do, it's allowed me to get additional training years, meaning that one time I, hopefully in the next year or so, I get a tenure track position, I'm going to be ahead of most folks who are kind of just starting because I had that cushion. So my tenure clock doesn't start until my actual appointment. So I'm going to have a lot of things in the works coming out. So it looks like my first year would be I was really productive, even though it had been in the works, right? So again, positionality, thinking ahead, planning ahead, and that may mean sacrificing a few dollars these past 3 years. However, that's going to position myself differently, where my salary is going to be completely different as soon as I get my grant, and that's going to make a significant difference in my life, right? So post my degree, I wanted to jump into a tenure track. I had the background for it, and it didn't sit right with me in terms of what my future plans were. So this postdoc year, these past 3 postdoc years have allowed me to just really hone in on what I want to do, how I want my career to look like, where do I see most of my energy and efforts going into, while still making sure I kind of give back to the community in various levels, through my clinical work and advocacy, and while also kind of like doing trainings and educating other folks. So that's kind of been like my experience in a postdoctoral position these past 3 years.
So my purpose in getting the PhD is that I do want to teach, but I also want to be able to do clinical work. The year while I graduated UCI, I was working at 2 nonprofit organizations, one as a support counselor and the other one as a youth specialist. And something that I was seeing a lot in my community is that there's not enough bilingual services, and the ones that are provided, this is what I realized through shadowing. I was shadowing someone that was translating in Spanish, and sometimes we miss important information that the client needs to know in order to get the best services that they can. So when I got into this program and saw that it was a bilingual program, and not only that, but that the population was majority Spanish speaking, I was like, perfect. Like, most of the faculty speak Spanish. The clients will most likely be speaking Spanish. So I feel like I will be able to really get that experience to bring it back to my community. That's essentially where I want to go back to, be able to teach there, be able to create more mentees in the Freedom Train that receive the same mentorship that I did. I'm doing that right now here as well. And it's just about realizing what that purpose is. And I want to create more us. Like I want those future uses to create more and more, and it keeps going, not only in the field of research, but in practice and community service. And I feel like by impacting one life, then that creates a cycle. And I feel like that's the beauty of the field of psychology. And the beauty of the PhD or higher level of education is we don't have to pick just one career. We can keep going. We can keep getting more experience, and we can do so much. Like I can't pick one. Like they're all like a core of my heart, and I want to be able to do most of it. Like I'm also a writer at heart, not only like in research writing, but like there's this book that I'm writing right now, and it's about the processes of a sexual assault survivor and being Mexican, being undocumented. And it's nothing to do with research or anything that's with experience, but it has that voice that has been created through the experiences of getting education, seeing what most of the people I'm working with have experienced as well. And it's just remembering like, you're not alone, like we're not alone. And that's what I want to really continue giving as I go on in my path.
Thanks for sharing, Maria. I think for me, I'm towards the later part of my program, so I will be exactly a month from today. We'll know where I match for internship. So a lot of my focus will be on clinical work. I'm also a recipient of the American Psychological Minority Fellowship, and I have a 2-year commitment to serving underserved communities. So I think after internship and postdoc, I'll be doing clinical work. I love clinical work. I love providing bilingual services and operating from a liberation psychology framework and theory. And so I'm looking to expand in that and to work towards becoming a bilingual supervisor. There's such a need, like you were talking about, Maria, and continuing to do research and work. I haven't figured out which one will lead. I think those values fluctuate. I had the honor of writing alongside Dr. C, and we just submitted our proof today, and that's been amazing. And so definitely wanting to continue to evolve as a researcher, but I think at this moment, clinical work will take precedence just because of where I am currently in my program. And like Maria said, we don't have to decide at this moment. And like you shared, Oscar, like, the universe has its own plan and it unfolds in its own ways. And so who knows? And I think I'm accepting of that.
I'll add something real quick. There's a lot of value in getting a post-BA degree. I used to limit myself just because I was only seen, or my view was from a very narrow lens and didn't see outside of that. So in terms of the benefits, it expands your network. I'll speak for myself. It has expanded my network in terms of people that I know, who I know, and that has really helped me outside of academia. So it's taught me skills that I wasn't taught, coming from a first-gen family and being first-gen myself, from anywhere from how to navigate this white system that we live in, to investing, to just other things that I wasn't exposed to early on in my life. And these are through the people that I've met through graduate school. So it's not just that it has benefited me academically, it has impacted other areas of my life, in terms of just people that I've met along the journey. So the benefit is not just getting a master's or a PhD. The benefits go beyond that through the people that you meet through the process.
I think in addition to that, I think something you shared, Fanny, that stood out is like how to go about it. And I think something that's been so foundational for me is Dr. C had a conversation with my parents around the value of graduate school and our logic behind me going to Madison for a master's or me pursuing a PhD. And I think that there are mentors who are willing to have those conversations, not only with you, but with your parents or with family members that might not understand it, right? Might not get it fully, and to engage in a reciprocal process of creating that bridge of like, what is the purpose, what is the value behind this? And I think as a first-gen student, I'm the youngest of 3 older brothers. Dr. C being able to have that conversation with my parents and like providing a sense of like paz and comfort of like, this is the purpose and this is the goal was foundational. And there are people that are willing to have that conversation.
Throw in one shameless plug too, last one, I promise. And this is because I am, my field of choice was psychology. The things that you can do with a PhD in psychology are just I'm still trying to find a limit in terms of what I cannot do. I can do a lot. I'm able to do, like I said, be in academia, be a nonprofit. I'm recently learning that we can be in the industry. I have a colleague who has a clinical psych degree, and her specialty is in, she's an alcohol researcher. Just started working for Pfizer. And it's like, I would have never thought about that. Like, I have a clinical degree. I just think I'm limited to providing therapy or academia. There's a lot of companies who are interested in the work that psychologists can do, especially in the realm of multicultural aspects of kind of like company subcultural responsiveness approaches. And even if you take more of a data approach, working for big pharma and so on. So there's a lot of things that you can do with the clinical counseling degree. It really opens up, depending again what you're interested in, what you want, and the possibilities are pretty wide.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing once again. Would anyone else like to anything else?
So there's a question on the chat asking if they took a year off, if any of them had a gap year. Maybe you guys want to add to that.
I took a gap year because I didn't get accepted my first time when I applied to graduate school. And that was because I put all my eggs in one basket. And this is what Dr. Z told me not to do. So I've also rebelled, and I've had to learn the hard way, right? She, from the get-go, again, didn't push me. She understood the context that I was coming from, and she's like, okay, I'll support you in whatever you want to do. And I had to live with that outcome, right? So it wasn't on her, it was on me. She provided the options and I made my decision, and that meant that I didn't get accepted the first year because I only applied to one program thinking that I would get in. The following year I expanded. I listened to Dr. C, and she kindly was like, we need to revisit the map and what are we going to do next? And we're going to apply to 8 programs and take a risk and go from there. I got 3 offers the second time around. So I took the gap year because I didn't listen.
That is a magic number. So for those of you wondering, like, how many schools do I apply to? That is a magic number, right? 8 to 12 schools is about right. And as Oscar says, then you get about 3 to 4, responses, sometimes interviews. So there are stages, right? You first apply, then you need to be interviewed by these schools, and then you get selected. So you want to have enough probability that if you fall out in somewhere in that process, something still sticks. But if you only have 1 or 2, that probability is not very high. I know some of you took another gap year. Maria, did you want to share, or?
Mine was also not planned. It was because I didn't get in anywhere. But it was a similar experience, only wanting to apply to California. Well, because of the fear of like, what's it being out of state, being undocumented, like what's going to be out there in regard to being a student parent, who's going to take care of my kid, no family, friends out here. So it's like California, duh. But I feel that California in addition, I feel like a lot of people are applying in California, so it's going to be even further impacted, while out of states are less impacted than California. Like, I feel like that has a lot to do as well with when we're applying to graduate school, something that I wasn't thinking about the first time I was applying. Because I feel like, I'm ready, like I have the experience, like I have the personality, like why aren't these schools wanting me? And it sometimes comes down to, there's people that have more experience, there's people that like have it more together, I don't know. So we do want to enhance our options. So that's why it was important for me to reaching out to professors before even applying and asking about that. What do you all provide for undocumented students and student parents? We have to know when we're applying out of state, especially to places we're not familiar with. So I feel like that really helped me in being able to reapply the next year with further intentionality and purpose and more knowledge of what they do have to offer me. And yeah, I'm here in Texas now, so would say it worked out for me.
Can I add something real quick before I forget? It's something that you said, Maria, that really made me think about. Most of us want to stay where we're at because it's home and it's familiar and it's comforting, and California has a lot to offer. And at the same time, I kid you not, the majority of colleagues and friends that I know who stayed in California come to California, the amount of debt that they end up with is ridiculous, more than 100K. I left graduate school with zero. I left undergrad with zero debt. So again, thinking about positionality, how do you want to position yourself? I knew that I didn't want to have any debt post-graduate school. I would have loved to stay in California, and I probably would have applied a third time just to get into UCSB. I'm pretty sure there were opportunities like, APA fellowships and whatnot that could provide some funding, and yet that wouldn't have covered the cost of my living. I went to the Midwest. I had an apartment, 1,200 square feet, with utilities, with internet, everything included. I was paying $400 a month. Right? That positioned me to be able to help mom. That positioned me to be able to save money for internship year, for travel, and so on. Again, there's nothing wrong with California. There's so many things that has so many great programs. It's just, how do you want to position yourself post-graduate school? And how do you want your life to look like, right? Student debt is in the billions. Your interest rates are like 7.76, higher than that. Essentially, you're going to be paying student loan repayments for like 20, 30 years. Plus, you think about, you want to buy a car, a nice car, then a home, starting a family, and it all adds up. So essentially, it's like, how do you want quality of life to look like? That was a tangent, but what you were saying made me think about that, Maria.
I think that's an important point, Oscar, right? Part of your mentorship and the Freedom Train is that it's that we don't want our students to acquire debt. And so oftentimes students come and they worry about going to grad school and having to pay $100,000 or having some type of, and that is not what our goal is. This is why we say go out of state, because the Midwest and very good programs across the country will pay your way. And we have partnerships or people who are looking for students that have the training that we've identified, those 5 educational pillars. And so people have been asking the question, how did you feel that the gap year was beneficial? Well, none of these students just took a gap year and sat back. Let's be clear about that, right? When they had to take the gap year, they worked. Like Maria was saying, she was at a nonprofit. Oscar did more research, right? They were all doing things that led them to get closer to their goal. And so a gap year will be as beneficial as you make it. So if you sit back and you're just at home and not doing a whole lot, that's not a good gap year. In fact, they're going to be like, what's happening to you? But instead, if you say, I'm going to engage these 5 educational pillars that were noted early on, academics, research, practical experience, leadership, and community service, then the person who's looking at your portfolio, like Oscar's saying about expanding that academic portfolio, will look at you and say, that was time well spent. Mm-hmm. Oscar, I think you have something to add. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what you're saying, Dr. C, prompted me to think. The other day, I was looking at just some finances in terms of what I was, I was on a fellowship in graduate school. I was on an assistantship plus tuition reimbursement. And over the course of 5 years, it was 100,000 that I received.
Wow.
Right. And so that really helped me to live, to pay for my classes, to books and cost of living, and help out mom. So that was me leaving California and diversifying. And again, I did that I'm glad you brought up the gap year, because I spent pretty much all my time in Dr. C's lab that year that I didn't get in. And she's like, all right, what are we doing next? What research are you doing? what lab are you in, and what are we publishing, where are we at, right? So it's making sure that year counts towards the following year. So at least, like, I keep going back to positionality because it's so critical.
Mhm. Somebody
I
asked the
think
question.
also,
Oh, sorry, Vero, go
sorry,
ahead.
Dr. C. I think also with a gap year is like, I think something that was a big learning curve for me was the difference between a master's and a PhD. And a master's really teaches you to be a practitioner, unless you're going into a research-focused master's. And so I think that I didn't take a gap year, but during that master's, I was focused on practitioner work. I had to be intentional about building my research portfolio to be a competitive applicant for the PhD, because the PhD is looking for a researcher. They are a researcher practitioner, but they lead with research work. At least that's how it is in my program, where we are required to do clinical work, but the idea is that they are making faculty, R1 faculty out of us. And so I think that with gap years, being intentional, how are you going to build up that, right? Whether it's through enhancing your research skills, your publication skills, presentation, or you doing that work in nonprofits and community service if you're seeking to apply for a master's.
Yeah, that's the question I was going to attend to right before it's time for us to do any final thoughts here. So somebody was asking, is this any different? Earlier they asked, is there a different pathway if I'm looking to go and enter law school? So we do want to make sure we distinguish that medical school, graduate school, and law school all have different trajectories. So let me say that again. So in order to prepare for law school, graduate school, and medical school, these are 3 different trajectories. And although, what happens for those of us who are first gen, we hear grad school and it sounds the same as law school or medical school, right? Like we're all doing the same thing. And the reality is that there are very specific things that need to be done for these 3 different field areas, right, of discipline. And so when you think about graduate school, this is the conversation, right, that we are having around perhaps a PhD in psychology, or maybe a PhD in sociology, or a PhD in social work, or things of this nature. You get ready and do these 5 educational pillars. Now, that's not to say that somebody in medicine wouldn't be able to do the 5 educational pillars. I have a few students, a handful of them, who are doctors, who are medical doctors, right? And who did follow the 5 educational pillars and who got into medical school, right? So it does work for medical school as well. And they are doing different types of work. So that's the thing. Like, we were saying, what type of work are you doing? So you might fill in those pillars, but as Veronica and Oscar and Maria were saying, they may have been coach, peers, or they may have been doing advising or counseling, but the medical doctor's doing something completely different, right? And so it's being able to fill those pillars differently. And the law school piece also, they are less inclined to see how much research you did. They're less inclined to say, let me look at those, theses that you completed or those research projects that you did. And instead, they're wanting to make sure that you maybe spent time in, doing an internship at the court system, that you did some policy work, right? So you got to fit in the work depending on that field. Go ahead, Oscar, sorry.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Dr. C. So I'm very fortunate now to be sitting on the medical school admissions board. So I'm able to kind of like make decisions who gets essentially into medical school. And it's interesting to say, because the 5 pillars fall really nicely into kind of, it just looks a little different, right? Yes, they have to have a great educational GPA. We do, again, medical schools tend to value research. So what kind of research do you have? Practical experience, what kind of hands-on experience are medical students or potential applicants get? What are they doing? Are they doing internships in hospitals? What is their experience in like the medical field? They really look at leadership. That's really important. And a lot of community service. They, especially in the medical school that I work for, community service is our kind of make it or break it. How much hours of community service have you given back, right? Because you're going to get essentially an education and make, economically, you're going to be able to, that's going to change for you. So what have you done to help people? So, and thinking about what the criteria that we look at, the 5 pillars fall really nice, at least within the medical school that I'm part of. It just looks slightly different, but it's just filling in the way that it would fall in for the field.
Mhm. Beautiful. So Ramon, I see that that's your question. So we'll say things like being part of mock trial will be helpful, right? Things like working for a nonprofit that has to do potentially with social justice. Or if you say to us, well, I want to be an attorney that's going to work with individuals and immigration. Well, maybe you should be working in a nonprofit that's providing access for immigration pathways, right? So these are the things that people would look for if you would be applying to law school and you tell me that you want to be an attorney. And you would probably benefit from having a degree in political science or social policy or something in that realm. And if not, at least a minor, so that they can see that you have some understanding of the discipline in that field. Great, that's perfect. It's all yours, Fanny.
So there is one more question I would like to address from the chat. Maricela says, how is it being in a PhD program while in the quarter system?
It's rough. It's rough. I think with having to navigate multiple hats, so being a TA and a clinician and a student and a researcher, it goes by really fast. I feel like undergrad felt really fast, and graduate school in a quarter system feels like we're going 120 miles per hour. And so I think there it just feels like there's a constant. I was just talking with my housemate who's also a UCI alumni and was mentored by Dr. C. It just feels like we're in this constant ebb and flow of stress because we're already in week 3, and it goes by really fast, but I think you get used to it in a way, right? The being resourceful and being in survival mode of switching hats and being on the go is something that you get used to. And I think that at first gen, being low income is something that we learn from a very young age. And I think that's something that I've been thinking a lot about in terms of the values, but also the practical skills that I've gained from my experiences and identities that I've been able to translate in graduate school. And I think being resourceful has been one of them for sure. I will say, I think most graduate programs do run on a semester system though.
That is true. Only the few. So I do want to say that while, that may sound very overwhelming, right? And I think grad school in general is very overwhelming. I do want to at least end in one piece here regarding their resilience and their ability to cope, right? So today we came together to talk about ways that our graduate students are thriving in these programs. And Oscar already is done, and he's a postdoc now. So, Dr. Perez, we should be saying. And so, but the reality, look at it, but the fact of the matter is that we want to at least remind you, those of you that are here to join us and hear their narratives, that family has maintained their path, that their mothers, that their siblings, that their nephews and nieces are the ones that help them, remember why they're in that path, that they motivate them, their children. Maria Isabel shared that the baby, Eduardito is, central to her process. She is also a single mother. And so I want you to recognize that while grad school may be difficult, that community, familia, right? All of them have said, I've built a larger network, but because we're part of an academic family. So the importance of social systems, the importance of connecting with in their case, their siblings, their academic siblings, and not going at this alone. Veronica just revealed or shared that she has a housemate, right? That's a UCI alum who has, I think, been somebody who has been instrumental as well in her own pathway, because at least they process together. So being able to find people in your path, right, that will do this for you, and not forgetting that familia, comunidad, is really why you're there, but not separating so much that you lose that insight, that purpose, and then se te quitan las ganas. Then the ganas will fall, behind, because you're no longer grounded. And so I want to thank my wonderful mentees who are always shining brightly. I also want to thank LRC. I want to thank Fanny and Alex for your time. And I'm going to now give the floor back to Fanny so that she can do the final goodbye.
I can take it. I muted myself. I can take it from here. Thank you, Dr. C. I'm just going to close out here for us. So truly, thank you, Dr. C, again, for your wisdom, your collaboration with us. We really appreciate it. Likewise to the panelists for your time and your energy, being here, sharing your experiences with us, and just letting other students know of your experiences and inspiring them as well. And then thank you for all the attendees for being here with us and being interested, and learning more about how you can hopefully one day get to grad school. And then thank you, Alex and Fanny, for organizing this together with the panelists and Dr. Castellanos. I'm just gonna share about a few upcoming events that we have in the coming weeks. For week 5, we have a Dreamcatcher program that's going to be facilitated by our Indigenous Community Programs intern. You can look out for all of these on our social media, but just wanted to announce them here if anyone is interested. For week 6, part of our Celebrating Afro-Latinidad series, we're going to be having a guest speaker who is the creator of a cartoon short series. Her name is Ekrama, and the series is called Hello Black Mexican. That'll be taking place week 6. And so other events for this series of Celebrating Afro-Latinidad are pending, but again, you'll find everything on our newsletter and on our social media. And then the last one that I want to share with you all is we will be having a collaboration sort of workshop with Professor Morales from the Chicano Latino studies department, and that will be just kind of being able to hear from him. And that's part of our Cafecito series. That'll be Thursday, week 7. And then lastly, if you all could please fill out the feedback survey that I believe was sent out right when this ended. So at 5, it should have been sent out, but if not, it will be sent out soon. You'll see it in your emails, just so we can gather further information and improving our workshops continuously. And I think with that, that's everything. So again, thank you everyone, and we hope to see you all soon. Bye everyone. Thank you.
Gracias. Buenas
Thank you
noches.
for the space.
Hasta luego.
Bye. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you all.
And then we can end the recording, right? Stop recording. There we go.